Hey everyone, this is Roman Prokopchuk, and this is the Digital Savage Experience podcast. Today I have with me John Murphy. John is the author of 10 Key Traits of Top Business Leaders, which is based on his experience of coaching top executives in Fortune 100 companies and other experiences he's had in his career. Thank you for joining me today.
Roman, it's great. Thank you for inviting me. And it's a real pleasure to be here and share my story with your guests.
Thanks for coming on. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get to where you are today and kind of writing the book?
Okay, well, I'll give you the short version rather than the long version. I started my career, my corporate career, because prior to running my own business and my own coaching business, I was in the corporate world. I started as a door-to-door insurance salesman. Then I became a sales manager. Then I became a sales director. Then I became marketing director, and eventually, through a number of companies, I became a CEO of a pan-European insurance group. So, and I discovered, Roman, that I enjoyed the journey to become CEO rather more than I actually enjoyed being the CEO. Now, it did take me a couple of years to discover that. So I think I was about 7 years in total as a CEO. But about 4 years in, I had kind of a major event in my own life, in that my first wife died very suddenly at the age of 39. And which, you know, is the sort of thing that happens to other people and not to you. And we had 3 daughters, and still 3 daughters. At the time, they were 15, 13, and 10 years of age. So that was a real, I mean, if that doesn't get your attention and call you up short, nothing will. And of course, you know, in the corporate world, well, I'll only speak for myself. I mean, I'm not knocking corporate work, because I wouldn't. It was good to me, and I hope I was good to it. But you know, you tell the story that, well, I'm doing this and I'm traveling and I'm here and I'm at meetings and I'm entertaining and I'm doing this, that, and the other, because I'm trying to build something for the family, which, let's be honest, there's a certain amount of that is true, but there's also quite a big chunk of it that you're doing it for your own ego, for the, you know, the big car and the big title and the big office and everything else, and the getting the number 1 car parking space at the front of the building. So, and when something like that happens, that is kind of, you know, major, you know, disaster in your life, that does bring you up short and say, okay, well, is this really what I want to do? And that was kind of the turning point for me, because I realized, you know, I didn't really want to stay in corporate life, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I took the part of the job that I loved, which was, you know, hiring, coaching, and developing people, and then getting teams together. I was fascinated by getting teams working effectively together. And so 16 years ago, I left and I started my own company, doing that, and I've been doing that ever since. And thankfully, I've been able to expand it and built it into, you know, working in a global basis in different countries with some major companies, and it's been fun. So that's a quick run through of my career.
Yeah, I think it's a very hard job to kind of build the right team also. If you want to relate it to sports, you can have a team of all stars, but they don't mesh. Same thing, you know, you can have these top executives, but they don't necessarily complement themselves, and oftentimes kind of hinder their own way or her own path. And I think even building individuals, building up teams, me being in previous director roles, building up teams and training up teams, and it's very kind of rewarding seeing people grow and even transition out of those companies, but seeing you added that value to them to become greater and move on to something else.
Yeah, because I think that one of the exciting things about, you know, getting a team to work effectively together is you just got to get the mix right. And, you know, and there's no science to it, in the sense of, you know, you've got to look for, well, how do you get the complementary skills? But the other thing that is the real hard one to really get a sense of, particularly at the interview stage, because everybody at the interview stage is on their best behavior, is, you know, will they actually fit in? Will they fit in with the culture? Because you can have the best skills in the world, but if they don't fit in with the culture, you're not going to have a high performing team. So you've got to get the structure right, you've got to get the mix right, but you've got to get the culture right as well. And if you don't get that culture bit, you will actually, it's a bit like pushing water uphill. You will get a certain amount, but you will never, ever optimize the potential of that team. And you know, more teams get damaged by poor culture and poor behavior than lack of skills or lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that kind of culture component, you're bringing your soft skills to that. So the level your soft skills are at, the level of your emotional empathy and emotional
Yeah.
IQ. Because if you hire a passionate person and they want to learn something, anything in terms of, knowledge can be learned as long as that person is passionate. So having somebody that already has that knowledge but doesn't have kind of the common sense to work in a specific team or a specific company obviously isn't a good mesh to start off with.
Yeah, it's and that is, yeah, you're right. I mean, you always feel, well, if it's a knowledge or a skill thing, that's kind of easily, fixed. But if it's an attitude or behavioral thing, then it actually becomes a lot more damaging. And I think that also, if you're looking at teams, and I find it interesting, with the work that I do in organizations, is that what people are looking for is really true leadership in the truest sense of the word, and that it's value-based leadership, that what people say and what they do, there's an absolute consistency between the two. Because what we're seeing globally is that we are kind of crying out for really strong leaders, in the political sense, in the religious sense, in the community sense, all of those things. And I know that's a generalization, that there's poor leadership everywhere, because there are pockets where there are some good ones, but generally speaking, people are really disengaging with a lot of things like that, because they're not seeing that leadership. And if you do see people inconsistency between what they say and what they do, and that what they say they value, but actually how they behave is something different, that's really where it comes unstuck. And I think in organizations, it's the organizations that are really focusing on building that value-based leadership and know what they're looking for in terms of values, and the values that people have, and making sure then that they've got the right blend of fit, in the organization, but that everybody adheres and buys into the values of the organization. They're the organizations that are strong. They're the organizations that are going to come out of the current situation in a much stronger way. And I think that, there's no doubt that the recent events with the COVID and everything is nobody knows what it's going to look like, right? All we know is that it's not going to be like it was before. And I see that coming out in the coaching work that I'm doing, is that people are beginning to question, people are beginning to reflect upon what they're doing, and people are beginning to kind of say, well, is this it? And they're also beginning to recognize that some things that they took for granted, they're now saying they're actually the really important things, and perhaps other things they thought were really important are perhaps not so important. So we're getting that kind of reflection in there, that people are beginning to kind of really question themselves. Are they just focused in the same way? If I go back to my own experience, was that I was totally focused on my career at the expense of everything else in my life. And I was fortunate to learn the lesson without, having done too much damage, in terms, because I was lucky that I was able to have a relationship with my 3 daughters. But people are really beginning to kind of question, am I growing? And am I actually going to leave a legacy behind? Does this actually matter?
Yeah, and you actually touched upon what I was just going to jump into, that whole legacy component. So I agree with you. A lot of people in kind of corporate roles, oftentimes when they're younger, I think in my 20s, I was kind of chasing the titles as fast as possible, as much compensation, being kind of, I guess, mesmerized by the shiny things. And then there was a mind shift, I believe, when I turned 30 to, what now? What more is there? And kind of changing to a leaving legacy and adding as much value, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I think that, that's why I kind of see, I think all businesses are kind of figuring out what's the pivot that they're making. And, and for my own, because I've seen this kind of shift coming for the last while, and I've seen it just accelerating in recent times, that I'm about to create a mastermind program for, like-minded people who are really looking to kind of build a life for themselves and not just make a living, and really make sure that they're developing the totality of their lives, and creating that framework where they can be with other like-minded people who are going to hold them accountable, and who are going to hold them accountable to growing in all aspects of their lives. And I think that's, I think it's a great thing that's coming out of the recent events and all the tragedy that has been around. But I think that the organizations who are addressing the gaps in their business model, and let's be honest, in all our businesses there are gaps, right? And I think that the companies who are spending the time right now addressing those gaps will come out of this much stronger and much more powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like you see some people or some companies really doing a good job to add value and be there for
Yeah.
their kind of communities and their customers, while others still are trying to kind of figure it out. And obviously, this is a traumatic time, but just because it's a traumatic time doesn't mean you can take something out of it or redefine yourself or pivot. I got into digital marketing out of the 2008 recession and
Right.
basically have been in it ever since. Started a company in 2012, and that was a pivot point for me. I mean, I graduated with a degree in criminal justice, interned with the Secret Service before graduating, and then the recession hit. So nobody was hiring, couldn't find a job. The opportunity came about, and I think that's what you do with that actual opportunity when it arises.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, you're a great example of that. And I think, if we go back to that 2007, 2008, yes, there was a lot of damage done to a lot of people, and, and the banks were no great friends to anybody. But also, there were some great success stories. And you will always, in all of those situations, you will see, it is the kind of the phoenix rising from the ashes, and you will always see that. But I think that an awful lot, it's not accidental, and it is those that actually really reflect upon how they are going to do things differently, and there's no template for it. You've got to create your own template for it. But I think it's obviously a very worrying time at all sorts of different levels, but I do think it also brings huge opportunity for many people, because I think that we don't know what it'll be, but we know it won't be the same.
Yep. I've been, I guess, remote for about 4 years now in terms of kind of my business structure and working. So the only caveat is obviously being stuck here with 4 kids and not kind of leaving my house. But I feel a lot of companies, Fortune 100s, 500s, were very hesitant about kind of remote work from home, and seeing with this whole situation, they had to really pivot. And some people were very standoffish to different aspects of digital transformation, and now it's being forced on them. So
Yeah.
things you kind of put off will eventually arise either through something like this or through a natural progression.
I mean, I even think, even at a very kind of small way, there are people who are using, I mean, the Zoom call we're on, there are people using Zoom that never used it before. There are people using, similar tools that have never used before. And, and what they're saying, what, this works. And I do think some of the large organizations, are going to challenge themselves as to, why do we have a huge big office block, on Fifth Avenue or the Champs-Élysées or Regent Street in London, or the most expensive places, and we have massive presence. Why are we doing that? So I think that they will start, I mean, okay, they're not going to divest of them immediately by any means, and maybe they won't do it at all. But I think they're really going to be looking at a different model, because I think in many organizations, yes, working from home was kind of part of it, but it was just occasionally working from home, but not working for any significant amount of time. But what they've seen is that, it can work.
Yep, and that's, I guess, be defined for every business. One of my friends actually works for a kind of a Madison Ave, marketing agency.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And basically, they've moved over to this because they were forced with it. But he's kind of complaining that there's no on and off switch. So
Yeah.
the person he reports to has no kind of disconnection between the workday and the fact that now they have to do something else at home. So he's being emailed, called at like 10, 11, 12 at night now about certain things, and figuring out where that disconnect for personal and professional boundaries are.
Yeah, and I think that, organizations, and I know from talking to some of them, they're actually realizing that they need to create those boundaries, because I mean, it's unprofessional for starters, but it's also, you can't sustain that. You will just burn people out. The quality of the work will be poor. So, it's kind of, and for some people, I think it's a sign in some people of that, I'm wondering, are people on my team actually working? So it's a lack of trust. So, if they respond to the email, and maybe they're more accustomed that they can look out the door of their office and see them sitting outside on the floor, so they can, whether they're on social media or whatever, but they look as if they're working. But now they don't have that. And I think in many cases, it's a sign of lack of trust that people will actually do the work. And I think that's wrong, but I think that is something that would change if we were to become more a bigger part of the working day.
Yeah, I agree. So what motivates you to succeed?
Um, I mean, I'd love to say that I was always kind of terribly altruistic and everything like that, but that wouldn't be the truth. I was certainly in the earlier part of my career. As I said, I was kind of motivated by the role, the success, the title, the money, the position, the profile, and all of that. And I think that kind of drove me on. But I think after that, it's been much more about the the work that I do, that the work that actually is fulfilling, that I'm really enjoying the work. And one of the things that I just love, I love being in the coaching process, because the coaching process, it's a very unique role to have, to work with your clients, to be the catalyst for change. I mean, I can't change anybody. They've got to change themselves. But to somehow play a part in being the catalyst to see people grow and develop and to live fulfilling lives. And I mean, okay, the entry point can be from a business perspective, but then you kind of broaden it out, becomes much more about the whole person. And really, I see the people looking an awful lot more for accountability. I think, to go back to the point you mentioned earlier on, is kind of, what's the legacy I'm going to leave behind? Does my life have some significance? And will there be something that people remember, that where I made a contribution to their lives? So I would say, undoubtedly, in the earlier part of my career, it was all about the glitz, the optics, and everything like that. That certainly pivoted for me, and to me now, it's about creating environments in which people can grow and develop, and that's the satisfaction for me. I mean, and yes, I'm in business, and I'm in business to make money, because if I don't make money, I don't have a business, and I can't actually, have that influence. But yes, I want to have a profitable business, and yes, I like going on nice holidays. I like going to nice restaurants. Would I do it for nothing? No, I wouldn't do it for nothing, because people wouldn't value it if you do it for nothing. And also, I want to have a successful business, so that in that way, I'm in a better position to make a contribution.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's important to be in like a career where you directly impact somebody to
Yeah.
make a change, or if you have something that's, delivering actual value in terms of changing a business structure, adding value in terms of saving jobs, creating jobs, and some of those things people don't necessarily think about, because oftentimes people think about, they're not a doctor or a nurse, or not directly kind of saving a life, but you are, through some of the things that you can be doing, impacting others and adding value.
I think it's also, I mean, I think it's the point it's really important to make, is that you can make a difference to somebody's day by just saying thank you, right? It doesn't have to be the big gesture. It doesn't have to be the major thing. And if you look at the whole relationship that you have in a coaching environment, it's not kind of a dramatic change. It's actually about small incremental changes that over a period of time make a real difference and a lasting difference. And that's what, the joy is, that you help and support people to make that shift, and then that shift impacts their business, impacts their home, impacts their relationships with their partners, impacts their relationship with their children. So now you're actually getting a much more fulfilled person. And that's, to be part of that and to be witnessing that every day is a real blessing.
Yeah, I agree. So, what's one thing you may have seen as a weakness in yourself in the past that you've turned around and utilized as a strength today?
I would have, one of the things that I would definitely say as being a major weakness is that I would react to things. I would just, and I would kind of run at it. And what I've learned to do is, you can still react in an appropriate way, but for some major decisions, to actually step back and to kind of evaluate. And the way I do that is to be really clear about what my vision and what my mission and what my purpose is, for my life. And And that actually stops me kind of reacting to do something just in the spur of the moment, because it makes me reflect, well, will doing this actually help me to get closer to fulfilling that? So it's kind of a filter to stop me kind of doing the shiny new toy, because I would be, something, a new idea. Oh yeah, I love that. And I'm off, right? And I'm off on a tangent. And I've done that. I've done that number of times in my life. And when I've done it without real reflection, sometimes it's worked out really good, but that's more by luck than by design. And sometimes it's been a really bad decision. So for me now, it's actually having the context of the vision and mission and purpose in my life, and to actually say, well, does this, what I'm looking at, if I make this, is that going to take me closer, or is that going to take me away? And just doing that stops me just reacting and responding and going after that, the silver paper that's fluttering in the wind. But yeah, I had to, a few knocks and a few really bad mistakes that kind of, eventually, it beat it into my head. You got to stop doing that. And I found that is the most helpful way for me to actually stop myself from doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of important to understand and kind of define what your core values are, and
Yes.
then kind of ask your question, do they align with it? I actually had maybe 10 episodes ago, a few months ago, a disaster avoidance specialist. So he's a
Oh, yeah.
doctor in kind of human behavior, and he works with, Fortune company executives to basically figure out how they can make better business decisions and not react kind of being driven by emotion, and evaluate certain situations and not, there's, I guess he says, there's emotional biases. There's a list of these different things that can negatively impact a decision and kind of trigger, a spiral of events that are unforeseen that can lead a business to kind of turmoil. So I found that kind of really interesting in kind of the decision making process.
Yeah. And it's interesting to talk about that, because I was talking to somebody recently and they were talking about unconscious biases, right? And, and when you think about it, you kind of, oh yeah, okay. And you can say, yeah, okay, I kind of get that. But then they actually dug into it and they started talking about examples, and you realize, gosh, I do have quite a few unconscious biases in, because you think about it in the big thing, but we all have them at some level. And it's really creating filters to catch ourselves actually, and recognize that, is it about the vision, the values of that, or am I responding because of an unconscious bias that I have? So yeah, I think that there are things, but I think, perhaps maturity probably helped a lot as well, or just maybe just getting older, and they don't necessarily come together. But I think that has certainly helped me to not chase after the shiny new toy.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it's the experiences of life. You develop emotional empathy and a better emotional IQ to kind of handle situations in different lights than you would maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, what's one piece of advice you can leave with the audience, personal or professional?
I think the one piece of advice that I would give, and I say it to kind of anybody who asks me a question like that, is to, keep learning. Always keep learning. Always keep, searching for something new. Always keep reading, keep studying, keep listening to things that are going to challenge your thought process, challenge your beliefs, challenge how you think and how you behave. And I think, sorry, are we still there?
Yep,
Okay.
you can leave
Oh,
off.
okay. Sorry, I think it just died there for a second. Will I go back and answer that again, or?
Yeah, you can answer it, and I'll just cut out
All
the.
right. Okay. I think that what I'd say to everybody is to always keep learning. I think it's so important to always be stretching yourself in terms of what you're reading different types of material, reading stuff that you think might challenge you, learning new skills, learning gaining new knowledge, and doing that, because I think that the more you do that, it exercises your mind and it keeps your mind open to possibilities. And I certainly, down through the years, I mean, I've been fortunate in the sense I've always embraced reading and kind of and looking up stuff and being curious about stuff, and that has really helped me throughout my career. And I think that the more you do that, the more you realize things that, gosh, there's a different way of looking at it. That's a different perspective. And I think that it helps also to really expand your knowledge and to see things from different perspectives. So I would always say, just keep learning.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of often say that like complacency is the death of innovation. So basically, you get to a point and you become stagnant. You don't redefine yourself either. If you're a company, I mean, example, many of the Fortune 500 companies 50 years ago don't exist. They didn't adapt. They didn't, redefine or innovate, and you know, adapt to the times or do something new or figure it out. So I feel like you said, constantly learning and redefining yourself, and in that sense, not only knowledge but trying to become a better person regardless of where you are in life. I think it's very important.
I think also everything matters, and everything is either everything you do is either adding value or it's taking it away. There's no such thing as neutral, right? So I think you've got to be really conscious: is everything you're doing, is this adding value or is this taking away? And to really kind of live by that.
Yeah, I agree. So I really appreciate you stopping by today. Can you let the audience know how they can find you or anything else you have going on?
Absolutely. Well, if they want to reach out to me, my email address is john@johnmurphyinternational.com. They can get me there. Or if they want to go to my website, and they can connect with me through there, and they can find me on social media. But the website is www.johnmurphyinternational.com. But I said the email address is john@johnmurphyinternational. And I'd love to hear from any of your listeners.
And you have a mastermind also coming up, right?
I have a mastermind coming up that we're due to launch at the beginning of June. And if anybody wants to connect and have a chat with me about that, I would love to have the conversation with them. And I would love to really have a chat and to see if it actually fits in with what they're looking to achieve in their lives.
Awesome. Thanks again for stopping by.